fellow writers. Welcome to the Pick Up the Pen podcast, episode number 2. I am your host, Sadie Chelsea, and today we're going to be talking about the term aspiring writer and why it's a term we need to stop using. Now, I came across this term on Twitter, actually. It seems like when I was connecting with a lot of writers, their bios said, I am an aspiring writer. And I'm going to be honest with you. It is a term that I used myself in the past years ago. I used to call myself an aspiring writer. And now that I'm actually a daily writer and published author, I can kind of look back in hindsight and see that maybe this isn't the best term we can be using to, label ourselves. To start, I went ahead and looked up the definition of aspiring, and the dictionary says aspiring means to long for, aim for, desire, or seek. Now, when we think about that definition and we apply it to ourselves as writers, it doesn't really match with who writers are. I say this because the only requirement it takes to be a writer is to write. Now, we might call ourselves aspiring writers because we think in order to be some brilliant, prolific writer, we have to be published or a best-selling author or write every single day or write 100 pages every week or whatever it may be. We call ourselves aspiring because we don't know how else to label ourselves when we're harboring that self-doubt of, I want to be a writer. But when we say I want to be a writer, we have this mental image that's like, okay, a writer is somebody who's like Stephen King, He writes all these books. He's well known. He's a national bestseller, and he makes his living from writing. But we don't really take that step back and say, I don't need to be like Stephen King. I'm on my own journey. And the truth of it is, writers write, and that's the only requirement it takes to be a writer. You don't have to be published. You don't have to be a bestseller. You don't even have to have a blog or a social media base or any of that stuff. If you are writing, you are a writer. We don't allow ourselves to just say, I am a writer, because we feel like frauds. If we're not writing stuff that people are reading or writing stuff that's getting published or writing for a living, we don't feel like writers. And so we add that extra word in the front of it, aspiring, because we don't feel worthy. So if you are calling yourself an aspiring writer, then you're probably harboring self-doubt, fear, unworthiness, because what happens when you just call yourself a writer? Just take aspiring out for a moment and just say it to yourself. I am a writer. You're going to feel that resistance within you. You're going to feel like, that's a lie. I'm not a writer. My words suck. Nobody's reading them. No one's going to publish them. I'm not a writer. I have to be an aspiring writer. I cannot emphasize this enough. It does not matter whether your words are readable or not, if they're published or not. If you're just writing in your journal or writing on pieces of scrap paper or jotting down words in a Word document on your laptop, you're writing. You're a writer. Just say it. Just say it out loud and be proud of it. No, I'm not an aspiring writer. I write. I am a writer. I am a writer right now. Another part to the aspiring writer term is that it's a term that keeps us comfortable. If we say aspiring writer, we can just kind of stay in that zone where we're safe and we don't really have that obligation to write every day or to try to write consistently or to try to get published. We don't have to take on the responsibility of those goals as long as we're calling ourselves aspiring. We're basically saying to ourselves, look, I want to be a writer, but I'm scared to take these steps. I'm scared what's going to happen if I try to write as much as I can. If I try to send my story to a publisher, I fear the rejection. I fear the criticism, the judgment. I fear the future of what will happen if I just say I'm a writer, claim it, own it, and do what writers do. So I'm going to stay here in this comfortable zone where I don't have to really take on those responsibilities and just call myself aspiring writer. But here's the rub. You will never be the writer you really want to be. You will never reach those goals, fulfill those dreams of that writer that's in your heart, as long as you call yourself aspiring. If you want to fulfill your goals and your dreams and lie on your deathbed and say, look, I was this great writer and I had an awesome time doing it and I would never take it back, and if I could, I'd do it all over again. If you want to be on your deathbed saying that, you can't call yourself aspiring. As long as you're aspiring to be a writer, that means you're not writing. You're not being a writer. You're just fantasizing about being a writer, and you're not holding yourself accountable. You're not holding yourself accountable to just say, I am a writer, and do the writing. Do what needs to be done. Every moment you spend fantasizing about writing is time that's not being spent on just writing. When we think about writing, sitting down to write, it comes to a point where it's almost easier to just do the thing than to not do it. But we sit in this comfortable yet painful zone of not writing because we're scared. We're scared to sit down to the page. We're scared what's going to come out from our hands, what words we're going to read. And so we don't sit to the page and we just keep calling ourselves aspiring writers. But if you are an aspiring writer and you're not a writer, you're a dreamer, just do yourself the honor and claim what you already know. If you want to be a writer, write. That's all you need to do. You don't have to be aspiring. Just say, I'm a writer, write. Be a writer and write. When somebody asks you, well, what do you do for a living? I am a writer. Drop the aspiring act and say, I am a writer. A third part to this is we are whatever we say we are. We are whatever we think we are. If you're calling yourself an aspiring writer, then that's what you are. That's what you're going to be as long as you keep calling yourself that, as long as you keep thinking that's what you are. You will just be dreaming of writing, wanting to write, but never actually writing. If you want to be a writer, you need to say, I am a writer. And even though you feel that resistance within you, if you feel like a fraud, if that's just rubbing you the wrong way, you fight it. And every day you wake up and you say, I am a writer. I am a writer. I am a writer. When somebody asks you, what do you do? I am a writer. When you make a new profile page on social media, you put that in there. I am a writer. This is what I do. Eventually, as that keeps seeping into your brain, you're going to start writing with less resistance, or you're going to start writing, period, because you are now starting to believe you are a writer. I can certainly tell you that's what happened for me. When I called myself an aspiring writer, it was just easier to avoid the page than to actually sit and write and be a writer. Well, I'm an aspiring writer, so let me go do everything else that's not writing and just ignore it. I can keep calling myself an aspiring writer for as long as I want because I'm just longing to be a writer, but I'm not actually being a writer. The moment I said to myself, enough's enough, I need to just call myself a writer, it was hard. Let's be honest. That resistance was rough, and I did not want to say that out loud. I did not want to admit or tell other people I am a writer. I still wanted to call myself other things, whether it was aspiring writer, or I'm a mother, or I'm a college student, or I'm an entrepreneur. I wanted to say everything else, but I am a writer. But here's how you know that that's what you need to be saying. Usually, the thing that we have the most resistance to is the very thing that we need to be doing. So if you say I'm a writer and you feel that resistance inside of you and it hurts and it's painful and it feels wrong, then that's a good sign. That means you need to keep saying it. You need to keep saying it until you believe it, until you start doing it, until you start acting like a writer. Everyone's different. Everyone has a different life, a different journey, a different timeline. For me, it took me months. Even though I said I'm a writer and I walked around calling myself a writer, I still wasn't writing consistently or even regularly, sometimes not at all. Sometimes I'd write and a whole month would go by before I wrote again. But I still called myself a writer because I was trying. That's what I wanted to be. And you are whatever you say you are. You are whatever you think you are. So I kept saying, I am a writer, putting that faith into it, that hope that as long as I keep saying this, eventually I will become this. So as I walked around saying to people, I'm a writer, I'm a writer, I'm a writer, it still took me probably a good 6 months before I actually sat down and was honest with myself. Okay, I'm a writer. What does a writer do? I need to take on these responsibilities of a writer. I need to try my hardest to be this writer I'm claiming to be. And that is a great transition. When it comes to a point when you keep saying I'm a writer and you finally say to yourself, okay, I'm a writer, what does a writer do? That means you're making progress. You are becoming a writer. You're moving from aspiring writer to just writer. I'm a writer, period. Every step, every transition of the writer's journey can feel so long. It took me 6 months just to go from saying I'm a writer to actually writing. And then it took me a couple years more to actually get on a consistent daily writing schedule. And then it took me more time to write something I liked, write something I had faith in, something I could send out to a publisher. And then it took more time to actually get published. So look, writing, being a writer takes time. Sometimes it feels so long in between transitions that it feels like nothing's happening. Like there's no change, there's no progress, you're still in the same spot. But I promise you, whether you listen to me, you can ask any other writer out there, read any books on the topic of being a writer, you're gonna find out if you just call yourself a writer, you're gonna be a writer. We don't let ourselves believe that because it sounds too simple. How can I be a writer by just calling myself a writer? It's too easy. We think everything has to be hard all the time. It doesn't. And you don't need a degree to be a writer. You don't need someone to hand you a certificate so that you can say you're a writer. You are your own person. You are grown. You are responsible for yourself. There's no one else in this world that needs to tell you who you are. You are the only person that can say who you are. So if you want to be a writer, don't be an aspiring writer. Just be a writer. Say, I am a writer. And allow yourself to keep saying that so over time you can believe it and eventually start writing and acting like a writer. But as long as you're aspiring, as long as you keep calling yourself that, you're not going to be a writer. You're just going to be a dreamer. And it's okay to be a dreamer. Dreamers are great. Dreamers are what help push our society, our humanity forward. It's what brings great change. Amazing, impossible things become possible when you dream. But there is a line between dreaming and doing. So you can either dream of being a writer forever and never be a writer, or you can dream of being a writer and also be a doer and write, fulfilling that dream. And very quickly, before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor for the day. Hi, Sadie Chelsea here. Have you ever thought about starting your own podcast? When I was trying to get this podcast off the ground, I had a lot of questions. How do I record an episode? How do I get my show into all the apps people like to listen to? How do I make money from my podcast? Is that even possible? The answer to every one of these questions is really simple. Anchor. Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you can get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. I simply downloaded the Anchor app, hit record, publish, and it was up. Easy peasy. That's what I love about it. Easy peasy. So if you always wanted to start a podcast and make money doing it, go to anchor.fm/start to join me in the diverse community of podcasters already using Anchor. That's anchor.fm/start. I can't wait to hear your podcast. I hope you start today. So here's the recap. We don't want to be aspiring writers. We just want to be writers. If you want to be a writer, you have to cut out aspiring and just call yourself a writer. It's okay. You're going to feel resistance. You're going to feel like a fraud. You're going to feel unworthy. That's natural. It's normal. We all go through it. But you have to hang tough. You have to push yourself through that resistance. You have to have faith. Keep calling yourself that no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody does, no matter anything that happens, you have to keep calling yourself a writer. It's the only way you're going to go from aspiring to actually writing. The only way you're going to go from dreaming to doing. It's important that you hang tough because the transitions, the periods in between, they are long. Sometimes they feel so long, not like nothing's going to happen ever. You're just going to be stuck in the same spot forever. But things are changing. They're happening. Even if you can't see it, even if you can't feel it, you are making change. That change one day is going to come for you. It's going to slap you in the face and be like, hey, I'm here. And you're going to say, wow, I was not prepared for this. But you were, because you've been waiting, and that wait will be worth it. But you have to hang through the wait. A very popular saying is, do not leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens. You have to keep pushing through every moment, every minute, every day. You do not want to give up 5 minutes before your miracle happens. So the solution is simple. Call yourself a writer. Stop the aspiring. Just say, I'm a writer. Allow yourself to feel that resistance. Now, though the solution is simple, the doing of it is what is difficult. But difficult is okay. Difficult is what makes us learn and grow and get better and repeat. As long as you keep hanging in there, no matter how hard it gets, you keep saying, I'm a writer, you are going to write. Hands down, period. No questions asked. Ask anybody out there if you need to ask. You are going to write. So, I urge you today to start calling yourself that. I'm a writer. It's okay. I might feel like a fraud. I might feel unworthy, but that's okay. It's normal. And I'm just going to keep saying I'm a writer because I know, I believe, I have faith that one day, as long as I keep saying this, I am going to write. If you are struggling with writing, starting to write, sitting to the page, finding time to write, or being on a consistent writing schedule, you can visit my website, thehonestwriter.org/courses. There I'll have a list of free courses that will help you make those transitions, take those steps, and go from aspiring to actually writing, or going from I have no time to write to yes, I wrote today. So go ahead and check that out. Of course, if you enjoyed this episode, please let me know. Leave a 5-star review, leave a comment, share this with a friend. However you would like to help or show your love, it is all appreciated. And until next time, please, my fellow writers, keep on writing on.